Hi, my name is Audrey Watkins-Kizee, and my presentation is on child neglect and substance abuse. According to Pickover and Brown, neglect can have several definitions, and there are multiple types: physical, medical, educational, and failure to protect. Some at-risk factors of neglect are lack of biological, cognitive, and emotional development, and nutritional deficits. According to Healy and Fisher, abuse and/or neglect impacts several areas, including biological, cognitive, and emotional development, as cited in Pickover and Brown. Glasser argues, depending on the severity of the neglect, brain function and normal development may be altered. For the federal fiscal year of 2017, there were a nationally estimated of 674,000 victims of child abuse and neglect. There are some studies that link childhood neglect to substance abuse, but more studies should be conducted which will focus solely on neglect. Because most of the studies that I found had childhood abuse and neglect. They were rarely separated. Actually, I didn't find too many studies that separated the two. According to Dupree, Oshry, and Coy, child neglect is the most common form of child maltreatment and has been associated with the development of internalizing symptoms and substance use in adolescence. I'm going to give you New Jersey's definition of child neglect. Abused child or abused or neglected child means a child younger than 18 whose physical, mental, or emotional condition has been impaired or is in imminent danger of becoming impaired as the result of failure of his parent, guardian, or other person having custody and control to exercise a minimum degree of care in supplying the child with adequate food, clothing, shelter, education, medical or surgical care, although financially able to do so or although offered financial or other reasonable means to do so. In providing the child with proper supervision or guardianship, child neglect has been recorded going back to as early as the mid-1800s. There have been several publications throughout history documenting child neglect. According to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, between 1854 and 1929, approximately 200,000 orphaned or abandoned children from the eastern cities were transported by train to new families in other parts of the country. Laynette and Prince suggest that child neglect relates to substance abuse. However, they could not pinpoint if it was because of lack of parental supervision or recent and or recurring neglect. A pathway to better care. I'm just going to line of events according to the Children's Bureau. In 1912, there was the creation of the Federal Child Bureau. And this, of course, was after after the orphan train ride. In 1919, first Child Welfare News summary was published. In 1938, the Fair Labor Standards Act was passed. In 1941, Standards of Care of Refugee Children was published. In 1953, the Children's Bureau becomes part of the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare. In 1970, government-sponsored Child Protective Services was formed. In 1974, the Child Abuse Prevention Act was enacted. In 1980, Adoption Assistance and Child Welfare Act was enacted. In 1988, the Abandoned Infants Act was enacted. And in 1996, states gave preference to adult relatives when choosing placement for the child that had to be placed out of the home. That means anyone in the family could get preference to take the child before they were offered the child to a stranger or put them in foster care. Okay, services. I'm going to start off with services in New Jersey. In New Jersey, if a child is removed from a home for neglect, it is done so by the New Jersey Department of Children's and Families Division of Child Protection and Permanency. It's called DCP&P. It was formerly called DIFAS, but they changed their names probably about 5 or 6 years ago, or could have been a little longer than that, but they recently changed their name to DCP&P. Under the Department of Children and Families, there are a variety of services. They have Child Protection and Permanency, which used to be DIFAS, the Children's System of Care, Family and Community Partnerships, Adolescent Services, Advocacy, Education, Licensing, Performance Management and Accountability, Institutional Abuse Investigation Unit, and the Department for Women. New Jersey Systems of Care, which we call in New Jersey, the Children's Systems of Care. And of course, in New Jersey, we call it New Jersey Systems of Care, or we call it Perform Care, provides services for parents, caregivers, youth, and of course, and providers. In this system, if a person is having an issue, let's just say a child was removed and he is now in foster care. So what the foster parent could do is either they can call the number for Perform Care, and they can ask someone to come out to do an assessment, and they can request services for that child. It doesn't have to be an adopted child or neglected child. It can just be a child who needs any type of services that are listed here. They have behavioral health, any child that has any intellectual or developmental disability, or people who have issues with substance use. So what they would do is, I think you can probably go online as well, but normally people call Perform Care and they tell them what the issue is. And they will have a case manager go over, take their call, they'll screen it, and they'll have someone come out to the home who will perform an assessment. And from that assessment, what they would do is to try to set the child up with some care, whether it be counseling, through mentorship. You can get a behavioral assistant. The counseling, normally you can request a therapist, or if you need, if you feel like you need psychiatric care or a psychiatrist or anything like that, they can also refer services of that sort. Outpatient therapy. There's in-home therapy, which I think is the way to go. I might be a little biased because that's what I actually do. But the in-home therapy to me is a lot easier for the parent because the person comes out to the home and provides the therapy. You don't have to worry about leaving your house, getting transportation. The services are provided to you and they come to you. So I think it's a pretty good setup, especially for those who don't have cars or who just are busy with life and only have a limited time. So you set the appointment up, you have the person come out to you, they provide the services for whatever time you have them set up and that it's available So it's pretty neat. I think the in-home services are really good. Okay, the interventions that I chose that I would use on the micro level, that would be, I guess, me working with the youth, building rapport, getting to know them. In the beginning, the youth will be often guarded because of the situation, frustrated and disconnected. So you try to meet the youth where they are and then take it from there, just one day at a time. On the meso level, I would enroll the youth into a community program, and the community program that I chose from the database was the CARES, Coordination, Advocacy, Resources, Education, and Support. According to the California Evidence-Based Clearinghouse for Child Welfare, this program is for families at high risk for abuse or neglect, children aged 0 to 7, or the primary caregiver or caregivers for at least one child under the age of 18 who is at risk of abuse, neglect, or abandonment of their family. On the macro level, what I would do is pretty much what I do now. I would advocate for the need for more collaborative-based programs, such as the Solution-Based Case Network. The SBC assists families who have an open child welfare case due to allegations of abuse and neglect. They also has been used, it's also used with families involved with juvenile agencies as well as preventive programs. This program is for all youth of all ages. Getting the youth involved in change early can help their outcome in the long run. Youth can also meet and have sessions with youth that are going through going through similar situations that they can relate with. And I think that's very important when a child is removed from the home, because everything they know is different, and depending on how many times they've been moved, I think sometimes having someone to talk to could help ease their transition. I think it's already a difficult situation with you not being with your family or a parent. So having even peers in a group session, like if they have a little group, if you guys could just talk about, if they get to talk about their feelings and how they get by and get suggestions and feed off of each other. And of course they have an adult there running the group. But I think that's a good idea. And it sounds like that's kind of what this program is. So I would advocate for that type of program, of course, because anything that I think that would benefit the youth the most. And in conclusion, what I would like to say is there is a very large number of abuse and neglect cases. There's 674,000. To me, that's a really high number. So I still think there's a lot of work to be done. I personally believe the number of cases will increase just because of the youth that I work with. I see a lot of, I don't want to say neglect, but parents are off doing their own thing and the kids are off doing their own thing. There's a lot of screen time, and I think that is the new issue for the youth today. Is all they want to do is be on social media, play their video games. And to me, that is kind of making them antisocial and creating a bigger issue, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. Separate neglect from, when they do the studies, I think they should separate the neglect from the abuse and not lump them together when they're conducting research, so we can know, is it really the neglect that is affecting them, or is it abuse and neglect? The studies that I use, they both pointed towards the neglect, but it would be really nice if they could just kind of try to separate it so it can have a more concrete answer. And of course, services increase, more services out there, more home-based services. I think home-based services are easier for people to access and focus on more